Medea by Euripides is a 4 out of 5 star read. Not just in our own time and place, but throughout history, 4 out of 5 stars has been the correct rating to give this play, and in this video I'm going to explain why. I first became interested in the 4-star rating of Medea after giving my own review on Storygraph and then looking at what other people had given. My favorite review was written by Murder95, who gave 4 out of 5 stars and wrote, "Good for her." My second favorite review was written by Mervalken, who wrote, "Girl boss too hard and killed my children," also with a 4 out of 5 rating. But it was the 5-star reviews which made me really interested in this topic. For example, we have Betsy222, who gives 5 out of 5 stars and writes, "She's just like me for real." Now, this is the kind of person whose opinion I can respect, but who I probably wouldn't want to share a bus with. We also have Leah Guest, who says, "I'm in love with a baby murderer," and Hope Pengilly, who says, "My girl did absolutely nothing wrong." For those who don't know, this is a play about a woman whose husband, Jason, abandons her for another woman, but the only problem for him is his original wife, Medea, is in fact a witch. So early on in the play, Medea says she's going to take her revenge on Jason by killing everyone he loves in a really brutal way, including, crucially, their own 2 children. Now, while 5-star people make me uneasy, the same is true in the other direction. 3 stars I can probably see eye to eye with, but once we get to 2 stars or even 1 star, then I'm starting to feel a little bit suspicious. For example, Aristotle. Aristotle would almost certainly have given Medea 1 or 2 out of 5 stars. In his Poetics, he singles out Medea as how not to do a tragedy. His argument is basically that major plot events need to be prepared for. They can't come out of the blue, they need to be seeded into earlier parts of the plot, like in Sophocles. It all needs to run nice and neat like clockwork. They need to be Chekhov's guns, fully loaded all the way through. Basically, be like Sophocles. This is what Aristotle said, right? It's almost like he's complaining about Medea herself, because while she is extremely intelligent, she's not very calm and collected or even rational. She's kind of the definition of a hot mess. Incidentally, Aristotle's tastes may have been reflected in the first audience of Medea. It came in 3rd place at the Dionysia, which means it came in last place at the Dionysia. 2nd place was Sophocles, by the way. But some people have written that there was probably very strong competition that year, and also these plays were always judged as part of a set of 4. You know, like there were 3 other plays that Euripides wrote alongside Medea, and that's how it was judged. So it's very hard to say. We can presume that coming in 3rd place, it probably wouldn't have gotten 5 stars. Someone who I feel more confident did give it 4 out of 5 stars, albeit 400 years later, is the Roman poet Ovid. Ovid borrowed really heavily from Euripides' depiction of women, expanding their range of voices, but also the psychological depth of women's voices in a way which must have been just as shocking, if not even more shocking, to a patriarchal Roman society than it was to a classical Greek society. And Medea features quite prominently in the Ovid that I've read. She's in the Metamorphoses, she's in the Tristia, she's in the Heroides. She has a whole big thing in the Heroides, which is kind of like based on this play, I think. And I don't remember if she's in Ars Amatoria, but I bet she is. Most importantly, though, one of Ovid's major works was a play, his own tragedy called Medea. And unfortunately, we've lost Medea. Ovid's Medea no longer exists. Maybe it's somewhere in a sarcophagus, but we don't have it at the moment, so we can't judge like what he was taking from Euripides. And obviously, he must have been changing quite a lot to justify making a new play. And knowing Ovid, the fact that he wrote this play means that he probably thought he could do one better than Euripides, or that there was something in the Medea myth that remained untapped in Euripides' play. In other words, inspired as Ovid was, he probably saw Euripides' version of Medea as imperfect and probably would have given it 4 out of 5 stars. Now, in terms of critics, and this is very interesting, as far as I can see, from his lifetime to somewhere in the late 20th century, Euripides has been famous as a misogynist. Even now, if you get older editions of his plays, which have translations from like in the 1970s or 50s or whatever, like I've read introductions where they say, of course, the reputation of Euripides as a misogynist precedes him, as can be evidenced in works like the Medea. It's like for over 2,000 years, the mainstream idea has been that Euripides wrote a play about a woman destroying the family unit. Euripides must really hate women. I can only imagine that all these classical scholars think that the non-misogynistic way to write women from mythology is to write the way that Homer did, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, where the women are kind and dutiful and caring tradwives. And if you want to write a character that's, vicious and strong and self-contradicting, morally complex, morally dubious, barbaric even, and a genius, then we have male characters, Euripides. Why not use them? Anyway, classic scholars and critics would historically have taken a star off for misogyny, so maximum 4 out of 5 stars. You know someone else who would give Medea a low rating? Steven Spielberg. I'm thinking of Spielberg because his film is out recently, but based on an anecdote that I love, I do think he's relevant to the conversation here. So in 1984, Steven Spielberg produced the horror comedy masterpiece Gremlins, directed by Joe Dante. There was a scene that Spielberg didn't like, and so in post-production, he went to the director and told him, you need to do something about this. In the scene, the actor Phoebe Cates tells a little story, there's a little monologue explaining why she hates Christmas. And what Spielberg didn't like about this monologue is that the audience doesn't know how to feel after listening to it, right? His criticism was that you need to make it clear, is this a moment where we should be laughing or where we should be crying or where we should be, kind of worried or sympathetic? And this for me is so indicative of the kind of director Spielberg is. Spielberg is a master of emotional manipulation in a good way, right? He's always in control of his scenes. When he wants you to scream, you'll scream. When he wants you to cry, you cry. He puts everything together so as always to be in control of the audience's reactions. He's very much the Sophocles of cinema. Incidentally, Aristotle would have hated Gremlins, I can guarantee it. Now, Joe Dante didn't change the scene. He left it as it is in the movie, and it is a gloriously awkward scene. My favorite moments in Medea, I think, that the moments that really hit me the most are, especially at the end, when she's having this dialogue with Jason and this space opens up, a sort of uncertainty, not necessarily an uncertainty in her words, she could, depending on how the actor does it, she could sound uncertain or she could sound very confident and triumphant, but there's something uncertain just about what Medea is, as a person, as a play, as a concept. There are these moments in the last conversation she has with Jason where I'm just wondering, who are you, Medea? Are you satisfied with this outcome? Are you despairing? Are you triumphant? Are you all of these things together at the same time? Do you know? Throughout this whole play, the chorus has been guiding me to feel sympathy with you, even as you plot these monstrous acts. And yet, despite all this, after everything, I don't know how you feel, and I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I should feel at this point, but I'm feeling something. That's the most important thing. I'm feeling something, even though I don't know how to articulate it, and it's a strong something. To be fair, I suppose, Steven Spielberg or somebody else might argue that this isn't really a Phoebe Cates moment because there's a kind of structural... One way of looking at the play is that it's structured around conversations between Medea and Jason from the beginning. We get, I think, 3 or 4. And the power imbalance is kind of one of the most important things at the beginning of the play. Well, throughout the play, Jason has power in terms of his ethnicity, in terms of his gender, his fame. Basically, he has a social status which allows him to do things like cast his wife away. She, on the other hand, is an immigrant. She's a woman. She talks about this all the time, how this gives her a kind of a lack of power with him. But at the same time, we know she has a lot of power over him because we know how prepared she is to go full Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And knowledge is power, and she and we have that knowledge that Jason lacks, that his wife that he scorned is ready to go to these radical extremes to get her revenge or to correct the power imbalance, depending on how you look at it. But honestly, I don't think Spielberg would like these last scenes because I think it's not clear how you're supposed to feel. I think he would have rated Medea 3 or maybe even 2 out of 5 stars. Now, finally, I want to talk about my personal reading experience of Medea because it was quite unusual and significant for me. I had been putting off Medea for a very long time. I first read Euripides quite a while ago. He almost instantly became one of my favorite writers. So to have gone for years having a writer who you really love, but having not read their most famous work can feel sometimes like a mini burden in a way, but also as something lovely to savor. I can't wait to get to his most famous one, you know what I mean? At the same time, having read so many introductions and having read so much of Euripides and knowing the plot of Medea and what, having read Ovid and so many people who've been inspired by Medea, I felt like I'd already read Medea. I kind of felt like I knew exactly what it would be like, and I felt that the chances were I probably wouldn't love it. I had the impression that Euripides himself would have only given Medea 4 out of 5 stars because it's so early in his career. It's one of the first things that he produced. And you know, like writers often, you know, don't look back so favorably on the first things that they write. And also, I guess, knowing how radical it was to have this complex, violent woman on the stage made me think that he probably didn't do much more than that. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's complex, violent women in his later on plays, but there's loads of other stuff going on. Whereas with Medea, I kind of felt, because it's the first time maybe this has happened in Western history, that's probably the main thing, and I probably already know what that's like, so there won't be so many surprises. And that's the thing, I love Euripides because he always surprises me, and I didn't think that Medea really would surprise me. So I kept putting it off, but at the same time I felt, if a very special occasion presents itself to me, that will be the time. I will know now is the time to finally read Medea. Now, in February of last year, I was asked a very strange favor. I was asked to guide / chaperone a group of Japanese experimental dancers in France, on a tour in France. I should say I do know these people. They're like basically family for me from when I lived in Japan. The idea, you know, was very attractive, but at the same time, like, I had no plans to be in Europe then. But the person asking me the favor was quite worried about them, and then I thought about it, and it's true, like, a lot of Japanese people in general kind of like struggle when they go abroad because it's so different from Japan. And these people also, they're artists, they're creatives, they're kind of like, you know, a bit pie in the sky sometimes, and they don't have things like pickpockets in Japan. It's just like, it would be nicer to have someone to help out in Europe. I did say many times that I don't speak French. I only speak like a smattering of French that I've forgotten from high school. But in any case, I agreed to do this thinking it could be a nice bookend to the year, and going back to Europe at that time meant that in November meant that I would be able to go to the UK to spend Christmas with my parents, which would be nice. So 2025 in my mind became structured almost around this trip that was going to happen at the end of the year. And another thing that was very special about it was that I would be taking the Eurostar. I was going to go to London, drop off my bags, and take the Eurostar, which I hadn't taken since I was a child and went to Disneyland Paris, the only time I'd been in Paris. But the Eurostar, right, like, is a train that goes under the sea. So like, that's just so thrilling. So I decided to read Medea on the Eurostar in November. I had a whole kind of vlog planned out, like reading Medea on the Eurostar. The Eurostar was disappointing, to be honest. It was fun, but disappointing. It was just basically a normal train with a big tunnel. And it's not like I was expecting there to be fish outside the window, but I did somehow expect something more, some sort of magic, which never quite materialized. Now, I didn't finish Medea on the Eurostar on the way over. One of the reasons it was taking me a while was because I was reading in English and in Spanish, comparing these two translations. Which was a really great experience. I've never done that actually with a book because my Spanish also isn't that great. And I wanted my Spanish to get a bit better because I was staying with an uncle who didn't speak English. So I was always speaking Spanish with him and his family, and then Japanese in the day, and then French for like kind of reading the menu and stuff, and then texting people in English probably to complain about it all. So I was pushing my language abilities to the absolute limits here. Anyway, I had a lot of adventures in Paris and Bordeaux. All sorts of really weird things happened. It was a wonderful experience overall. Exhausted, I went back on a bus, which went onto a train. And that also went into the Channel Tunnel. So I was on a bus on a train under the sea, which was a very strange feeling, like the smallest Matryoshka doll or the innermost meat in one of those grotesque meals where they shove one bird into another bird and then they shove that bird into an oven to roast. At the end of everything, the year came to a close and I finished reading Medea by Euripides. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Let me know what you think of my rating or any other thoughts you may have down in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you next time.